All right, you're in tune to the Venus Project UK supporters show with me, Aidan Fry.
Hello, I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephen Black.
Stephen, do you want to give like a quick introduction? Everyone else knows us, but you're new to the scene.
Sure. Well, I'm a futurist. That's what I call myself right now. I study sustainability. I have a long history of studying engineering and, oh God, everything. I'm a generalist, basically. I try and study everything, and it increases my creativity and understanding of how ideas are formed and how we can use them to transition to a sustainable world.
Oh, that's amazing. And your
Mm.
locality?
I'm in the United States. I just moved down to New Mexico because it's a desert climate with a lot of sun, and we're starting an experimental project called The Future. So we thought we could show how we can transition on a small scale to something that is sustainable for everybody in a harsh climate.
Nice. And we'll be definitely returning to that a bit later. And it brings us on to our topic of today, which is the transition or transitions. And basically, these are words that get thrown around a lot, and let's try and understand what they all mean. So, like, the first thing, I don't know, I'd go when you say about transition is to kind of realize that generally everything is transitioning at all times. Like, the universe is in a state of constant flow, and there is no end point, there is no utopia. So, when we talk about transitions, maybe having like a start and an end point, they're still within a larger transition that is ever going.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I was going to say regarding social change, a lot of people kind of think of it as something which happens within like a few years, like within a generation. Suddenly, bam, we've got a completely new socioeconomic system, and a lot of people don't understand the importance and the length of time it'll probably take to transition from the monetary system to a resource-based economy, that kind of thing. And also these black and white separations as well. Like it's not really a related example, but when people talk about generations, like the people, the young kids in the other generation or the generation before me. Well, it isn't. It's not like a block category. It's a constant. Well, the age, like there isn't like 16-year-old and then 26-year-old and then 36-year-olds. I don't know if I'm the only one who kind of picked up on this, or if this is kind of something common that people just don't talk about.
it is the strange one because it's like, where's the line? Like, where's the generation? Is it based on the 90s kids and the 80s kids, and then like, what's the calendar based on? Like,
yeah, like damn the younger generation or something. But I mean, it's a constant thing. It's a constant transition of age groups. It's not the younger people. There's always going to be young people. I don't know. I don't know if I'm stating something really obvious.
Well, ageism is pretty large, but I think the other main point there is that is one thing lots of us have in common, because the way our educational systems are set up, that we enter certain key stages and we gain certain rights at certain ages, that it does make it easier for us to have ageism or just groups based on that. So yeah, like everybody's going through college right now. When they get out, they're going to be a part of a specific group that just got screwed over because they were convinced into spending a lot of money on something that it's apparently useless, but they won't know that yet. So they'll then be put in a situation where they'll have to create social change because they cannot survive in the environment that was prepared for them.
Yeah.
Mm. So like growing and learning is a form of transition as well, I guess. It's something that we're all kind of on, and if you kind of stop like learning and stuff, that's when you tend to get into kind of spirals or the rut, or depression kind of sets in, is when you stop you feel like you've stopped transitioning. You are always changing, but to maybe you're conscious to like your level, it doesn't feel like you're changing. I had this very strange thing the other day where I was like, I go to work every day and it's like a half an hour drive, which is really bad, like there and back each day, and I basically go to the same place each day and I come back. And I just I was thinking to myself, like, I go to the same place each day and I come back, but every day it's a completely different place with like relatively to like just the sun, we're miles a different place, like around the universe. Like a whole bunch of my cells have completely changed in that time, and like it's strange that you don't realize that all the change that is going on around you.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kind of I was gonna say kind of a positive light on it, on perpetual monotonous work.
I like that. I think the other thing is also, of course, homeostasis, something that I haven't talked about in a while. But when the people who are most able to make change are the ones who have their homeostasis disrupted. So you have people who graduate high school, their homeostasis is disrupted. They are then in a position of change or transition. Then while they're in college, they kind of get settled and they get kicked out of where they finish college, and then their homeostasis is disrupted again. They have to move somewhere else. So each time this happens, it creates the opportunity for transition or change.
Sorry, just to kind of like homeostasis. Can you just kind of explain that a little bit? Is that kind of when you're settled in a location and then you have to move?
Sure, it's kind of like when your body is in a comfortable place. It adjusts to its environment. So any change to your environment is actually a stress on your body. So when you move somewhere new or whatever, you're disrupting your homeostasis. If you always have a routine schedule and then something changes your schedule, you actually get anxious because of it. You notice this physical change. And depending on how big the disruption is, it can actually cause physical illness. But at the same time, this is what is needed to make change. This is why a lot of times in history, when you have global movements, or not global movements, any kind of social change, it's usually when a lot of people have their homeostasis disrupted at one time and they're trying to reach a new equilibrium. So to find that balance, they have a lot of change happening. So, for example, when autonomous cars come to the UK, you're going to have about 2.5% to maybe 5% of your population's job force disrupted, which is significant. And that will be enough to cause these people to seek reform of some kind.
Yeah,
but
it's an interesting
until
analogy.
that happens, there won't be that change because they don't have the reason to. They're comfortable where they are. Go ahead, Tom.
I was just gonna say that's an interesting analogy, actually. The human, the biological aspect of it, and then relating that to the sociological aspect of it, the bigger picture. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's something that I've actually kind of been thinking about as well, because we talk about environment shaping like behavior, but it seems like a change in environment can also change your thinking patterns, which is not something that I know thinking patterns is part of behavior, but I kind of like didn't think of it that way. I was separating the two, and that's when your brain is reaching for new solutions.
We are most creative and we do learn the best when our homeostasis is disrupted. If you were to try and learn a new language from your home, it's going to be difficult. But if you get thrown into a different country where you have to learn kind of thing, your brain will just like go on this learning mode. You'll start learning things very quickly. You very quickly adjust to your surrounding environment. If you go to a neighboring country that still speaks English, they have an accent. If you're there for 2 weeks, you'll notice you've adopted the accent. But it's also quite dangerous because the thing is understanding homeostasis is important because just giving money to a homeless person, their natural state is being homeless. That's actually where they're most comfortable. So yes, they'll have money, but they'll quickly spend it and end up back in that same state. And this is applied to anything. People get used to a certain state they're comfortable in, and it's hard to get them out of it. So that's why oftentimes when we talk about ideas like a resource-based economy or things, is if it's too foreign to them, it would potentially disrupt their homeostasis, and they aren't comfortable with it. They actually physically feel ill towards the idea of it.
With regard to a disruption of people's homeostasis, something I often open with nowadays when I talk to people about the Venus Project, I don't actually mention the Venus Project or resource-based economy at all. I say, a few studies have shown that by, say, 2035, 70% of jobs will be automated, and that the world population could be around 10 to 12 billion. How do you think that will affect society? And I'll leave it open. And for me, kind of people instantly think in a kind of egotistical sense of like, shit, how's that's going to affect my life, kind of thing. You know, what will happen to my job? Is my job, you know, available to be automated itself? And then they begin to ask their own questions. But I've found that that's that kind of just that question or that concept of, you know, technical unemployment is something that a lot of people can think about personally, and that often leads on to nice discussion of, okay, so what alternatives do you think there are? You know, things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. What I like to do, and I try and encourage people to become futurists, because all that really means is that you are really able to think ahead into the future and how certain trends will lead to a certain stage. So, say we're talking about the world, we say like in 2050, the world is going to be like this because we have these different technologies and it should lead to this. So then they're left with the question is, okay, well, you know what, that actually makes a lot of sense. That's a very logical, I could see that. Now the question is how did we get there? Kind of thing. So if people can see the final picture, it's a lot easier than them envisioning how it was built. Just like a home or something. People, when you go get a new house, they don't look at every single stage of development of what their home will be. They just look at the final product and decide if that's what they want.
That's kind of what we're talking about today, really. That's kind of that topic, isn't it? There's the final product, there's the like resource-based economy, but then there's the transition, and that's something people don't understand very much.
I was thinking that kind of leads into, so like the Venus Project's kind of stated transition, which is their aims and proposals. They've essentially got three steps that or three phases that they've said this is what we're going to try and do to make this happen. So the first one is basically it's already up and running. It's their Florida research center, and the book The Best That Money Can't Buy. So that's all out now. Phase 2 is the Venus Project film, which is kind of what Stephen was just saying there. I think the film is the general idea, as far as I know, is the film will be with like a couple sets within a resource-based economy. It's not going to be another documentary about Jacques. It's not going to be another documentary about all the things that are wrong with today. It's going to be, this is what we could be. This is what we could do. And kind of throw people into it so they can get a real sense of what it would be like.
That's definitely, oh, go ahead.
No, just go on, Stephen.
I think it's a good idea to get people starting to think about the potential solutions. My concern is that, well, it's a solution, and there's a lot of solutions out there. And how we get there, there's so many different ways, but really, it's almost an inevitability when you look at automation. We are getting rid of most jobs. And when this happens, what's going on then? But the thing is, we're not just getting rid of most jobs. If that was the case, we'd be in for a lot of trouble. The thing is, we're also getting rid of the need for most companies. So there's kind of a balance that we'll be approaching. I like to talk about 3D printing a lot and sustainable design, because with 3D printing, it allows us to theoretically make anything we could possibly want to consume, including food, organs, toys, everything. Our houses, all of that. And using sustainable design, which is you design a product so that when you're done with it, you can reclaim 100% of those resources for recycling, turn it into a new and upgraded project. And then you have ephemeralization, which means more with less. So if you were to look at the history of computers you've owned, every time you upgrade your computer, it's faster, stronger, better, and yet it has less material in it. So all these things combined really mean that every time we upgrade something, we're going to have an excess of materials available, and we'll be able to have more of it. So we're not going to need corporations producing things for us. And without the need for that, we don't have a need for money anyway. We're basically becoming self-sufficient, independent of them.
Well, the problem is that if things like the film don't get out there, and the bulk of people don't understand what alternatives there are, don't understand the problems that are actually being caused by today, like the automation could just be done to replace people, more advertising, people still have to spend stuff, you get like a basic income type thing, which is your rations essentially, and that's how much you're allowed to live. And the automation just does everything. No one works, but we're still subservient, and it can still be like detrimental to the environment and detrimental, obviously, to us.
True, but one of the things that happens there is what does basic income allow? It gives us all more free time. With that free time, then allows people to relearn or start learning new things and become educated about what's going on. The problem we have today is that people are working multiple jobs and they come home and they're exhausted and they just veg and then go to bed or whatever. So they aren't being aware of the world. So that will still be a transition point where people have time for self-actualization.
No, that's
I've
true. I'm not saying that all basic incomes are bad, like as a whole idea, but you could see it. I could see it used in a very negative way in a system like what I was trying to explain. It could be used in a good way as well.
I've never thought of that actually. The idea that, well, it seems quite simple now, but if basic income were instituted, I used to kind of think it would kind of just perpetuate the system without much good, but obviously, it'd free people up. And as long as the internet stayed relatively free from oppression and censorship, then those people could then educate themselves as to the solutions. And then the alternative, if basic income were instituted and there were many, many more hungry people, I'm guessing that there would be some kind of violent uprising, and that it's not ideal, but I see that personally as a better alternative to a perpetuated system.
Well, you could almost flip that on its head. You could think that maybe like people who are really desperate will look for an alternative quicker.
Yeah.
People who are like, if there was a base, because the amount of people today who are on welfare and sit at home and just watch like rubbish TV all day, like they have time but they don't have motivation. So you can't just give people time and expect them to educate themselves.
It's absolutely true. The thing is you have to look at why they're in that situation also. It's not necessarily just as simple as the fact that they have time. It's they have to be aware. Also, a lot of these people who are on welfare, this kind of stuff, I mean, they might actually have real problems and they need assistance.
Yeah.
So we need to have social programs to help them.
Oh yeah.
And of course, they don't have the resources to get out and do a lot of things, so they're not necessarily aware of it. You will not find the Venus Project as a normal person on the internet. You just don't come across it. It's something that you have to somehow be shown or whatever, because the way all search engines are set up is they appeal to what your history has shown that you want. So like Google, if you're a conservative person, most of your search results will be biased towards conservatism. Well, I can't say that word. Towards being conservative. And the same as if you're liberal, or the same as if you're anything else. Your results are very biased. So it actually makes it hard to get exposed to new ideas. That is one of the flaws of Google right now, is that you are not being exposed to new things.
That's true, and I can say that we're trying to do that here, but UK Collapse Radio's, it's niche appeal. It's people who are very interested in this stuff. It's not Radio 1 or whatever you have in mainstream radio stations in the US. But we're trying. I think we've got talks and events coming up, and I get some business cards that I can start posting to people and just sending around and putting up places. So I think I'm going to try.
Well, the thing is being there when the people are ready. So a good opportunity is, again, when the taxi service goes to driverless cars, be there for those taxi drivers that just lost their jobs, so they can understand what's happening. Catch those people. You have hundreds of thousands, actually millions of people yearly are being displaced due to technical unemployment. That's the time you capture these people. We don't need to get the entire world at one time. They aren't ready. But you get them at the point where their lives are disrupted. And it's easy to just follow the news and you can find out who these groups of people are, and then you can appeal to them. In the U.S., there was just some news today that I read about how we have most GMO food in the world, and Our health natural food stores recently lost and said now they have to supply GMO food. And their natural food and all this kind of stuff is actually GMO. So we only have two types of food in America: organic and GMO. And they're working on even turning GMO food into being labeled as organic. So we're going to be having eventually new movements and stuff for people who want safe food. And I think this is going to be an opportunity because the only way it can happen is if it's in a controlled environment. Because right now, it's, um, the pollen just contaminates neighboring crops. So vertical farms are actually going to be very likely. And that can become a new way to distribute food in America, which is going to bypass the agricultural industry. And you can have guaranteed food, you can have membership, and we can get food at cost through automation. So this is a way to suddenly expose people and give people access to food, and it's a step towards transitioning towards RBE, where people get fed up with the system to the extent that we actually implement new solutions, which are better than what's in place right now.
Very much so. That's with that kind of foodie thing. That's something that I've been thinking about, and I'd love to aim for, to be honest, in the next couple of years. If I can find somewhere, try and set up like an automated as much, well, aquaponic or hydroponic kind of system where I can vertically grow things and try and automate it as much as possible, because I've got I'm pretty good at programming, so well, I do it for I don't know, whatever, but I want to do that, and then the aim is not to sell it. The aim is to give it to charity. The aim is to give it to schools. Give it take tours, teach people about what the system is, what it can do, and kind of introduce them to ideas along these lines.
Well, if you come down to the future at the end of the year, you'll be able to work on that. Exactly what we're trying to do is designed integrated systems where we have vertical gardens built into the living environment. And there's a lot of benefits of doing this. We are providing fresh air in the environment. The plants are getting CO2 enriched air. The air is environmentally controlled, so we keep it cooler or warmer depending on the season without having to exhaust the air to the outside. That's one thing that most homes have to do right now, is you can't simply lock it up and not allow air to exchange because you'll suffocate. But if you have a substantial amount of plants in there, you can actually do that. You can have a more closed environment, so you can significantly reduce the energy inputs in this type of farming. And
That's nice.
yeah, it's a really, really efficient way to do stuff. And so yeah, and it's very healthy. We have cleaner air than being exposed to everything else. So there's just a compounding effect of benefits that happen when we start growing our own food on site. And yeah, if you come down at the end of the year, you can participate in this project. Absolutely. I want to talk to you more about that later. But I would love to have you here.
Yeah, it's a possibility. I even told my girlfriend about it.
She can come too.
Yeah, I need to convince her, I think. We'll see. We'll see. It sounds interesting, though. Do you want to maybe just talk a bit more about the future and your little transition?
Of course. So before I even heard of the Venus Project, I actually had already started the idea of the future. It wasn't called that yet, but it was just realizing that we needed to have transitions. I studied time banks. I studied how different towns and stuff are creating resilience, and I had all different ideas. I have a lot of blog posts and stuff I've written. So it's interesting to look at my history of how I got from how I used to think to where I think now. And I'm very sympathetic to people who are new to the idea of resource-based economy, because they, of course, have hundreds of ideas for why they think their way is better, that kind of thing. And it takes a lot of thought, and I encourage you to keep going and asking lots of questions, but eventually I think you'll get there. But anyway, the future is acting as a sustainable solution for how we can all live today. It's a scalable and duplicable model of living. It consists of 4 parts: a hostel for tourism, which is how we interact with the rest of the world that still uses the monetary system. It brings in income, allowing us to get more resources and stuff, but most importantly, it allows our guests to be exposed to a sustainable environment. As I mentioned before with homeostasis, is your environment is incredibly important to how you function as an individual. And You can't make somebody be sustainable by talking to them if they live in an unsustainable environment. Just the same way as it's really difficult to be unsustainable if you're in a sustainable environment, if it's designed that way. So we are having the second part, which is a sustainable community, where we are able to provide everything. We'll have aquaponic gardens. We'll have our own energy production. In New Mexico, it's sunny almost every day. Um, and we're going to have continuously trying to demonstrate the newest technologies available that make us more sustainable and increase our quality of life. We're also going to have learning centers where people can come and learn about all the technologies we have, learn how to use them, learn what sustainability really means, learn how to sustainably design things, learn about projects like the Venus Project, like the Zeitgeist Movement, learn about countries that are transitioning, like Ecuador, because this news is stuff that isn't in your media. It's not relevant, it's not interesting, or they just don't want you to know about it. And the fourth part is sharing centers. We believe in access, not ownership. Really, nobody wants to own anything for their entire life anyway. Name one thing that you've owned since you were a child that you still hold on to today. You may want to have access to it for an extended period of time, but when you're done with it, what do you do with it? Most of us throw it away, which is a complete waste of resources. Using sustainable design, we can then turn that into something better for us. But also, if you were to look at how Amazon.com functions, it's a completely automated distribution system. And that's how we view our sharing centers. Is you need something, you find it, you check it out, when you're done with it, throw up, puts it away for you. When you need it again, it's there, you come take it out again. At your convenience. Significantly reduces the amount of living space you need, as well as the amount of items that we have to own. So our cost of living drops to about 20% what it is for a normal person, which allows us to, quote unquote, as a whole, own things that none of us could own as individuals. So our access to variety goes up significantly. So by exposing people to this type of living, I think it's easier for people to understand what the future can be, what a sustainable future can be, and how this is similar to what a resource-based economy proposes. So that you don't fight the idea of not understanding ownership. It's like, well, you know what? When you're traveling, you don't carry all your belongings with you anyway. So you've come across the world to visit us. You now have access to more stuff than you already own at home without the hassle of having to, of course, transport all your belongings with you. And the other big part of the future is we're a cooperative. We plan on having a chain of future sites all over the world so that people can freely travel between all of them. And you're never having to pay for a place you're not at. The living quarters that you would essentially have as your private space can be a single unit, or you can expand as many units as you need. But when you don't need them anymore, you can return them. As well as common areas and common private areas, which would be areas that, like a living room, for example. When you're not using it, somebody else can use it, but you can reserve it so that you have exclusivity to it during those times. So it's a different way of living to show that we can have a much higher standard of living on a much smaller budget than we all have today.
Sounds fantastic to me. I have a lot of questions. Like the one at the forefront of my mind is, at what stage is this project at now? Like, how much land do you have? How much, like, how many buildings, I suppose?
We're in the early stages still. Right now, I'm actually going to visit a farm who's interested in a joint venture for about 340 acres. And then there's another family who has another 31 acres that they're very interested in developing this type of project as well. We have the designs laid out. Something else that's important is when I say sustainable design, this is something that is not generally done with buildings right now. These buildings are designed so that we can actually remove everything. So if we have a 5-year lease, we can actually remove all of our stuff without leaving like concrete slabs or having damaged the environment. So we're being very picky right now in our early stages with who we work with because we don't want to compromise any of our values, and we're trying to make this something that's affordable for people of all incomes to come and visit, rather than just keeping it to an elite group again, or people who have lots of money for traveling and that kind of stuff. We're trying to show that traveling is something that should actually be like a human right, because this is what is important for development. People who travel are the ones who, when you talk about resource-based economy, those are the people who most easily understand it because they have left their belongings behind and they understand they would rather have access than ownership to things. So we want to make more people travelers because travelers share ideas. So yes, we're in the early first stage still of getting land and some more financing. There's lots of grants that we qualify for. We just moved down here at the end of last year. Hopefully we'll have some sites that people can come and visit by the end of the year. My goal is to have a place for Aiden to stay.
That yeah, that sounds really good to me. God, I don't know. I mean, if it's in early stages, I don't have many other questions. But the principle, the idea of appealing to people who travel, seems well, it seems like it'd work a lot. Like as if it's kind of like a stop-off kind of thing for people who travel in the world. You know, is that what you're trying to? Is that the kind of idea? Like having stations around the globe for people to travel and stay for a while.
Exactly, and we're setting up the cooperative model because we can then easily allow other businesses, other hostels, or even hotels, or people to become members of this and to quickly expand our network of locations that you can travel along. So it's like Airbnb without having any monetary exchange kind of thing. But the model is actually kind of complex because we do allow. I mean, if you just come as a normal visitor, you have to pay to stay, of course. But we're also making it so that people who don't have money are able to contribute by either doing some things that need to be done around the hostel. That's what hostels are notorious for, is where you contribute by reducing the cost of work that needs to be done. Or the other thing that we're doing that's unique is with our learning center. If you participate in some learning activities or sharing activities, you also get a discounted rate. And the more you share and or contribute, the larger your discount is, and to the point where it becomes again free to stay.
Do you have an idea of where initial funding will come from then? I don't need specifics like my friend does this but I mean, do you have an idea of how you're going to cover the expenses and things?
Yeah, we're looking for people who have resources available, such as people who already own the land. We don't plan on actually buying land for this project. We just plan on leasing land. We have our personal savings, which will be invested into the first hostel and residential areas. And then people who choose to become permanent members or want to adopt this model will be able to buy in and become members as well. Once we have a site, that there are many millions of dollars of grants in the U.S., in our state specifically, for sustainable living, sustainable solutions. So a lot of it's going to come from the state. We're going to try and run as a nonprofit. At least the Sustainable Community Sharing Center and Learning Center will be nonprofit. The hostel may be for profit in the beginning.
I guess, like, as we're talking about traveling, the thought kind of got me early because you're saying about breaking homeostasis, and basically, what it seems like is you got to kind of manage or like give people an environment where they can direct that breakage towards something good, because you could very easily start throwing rocks or something.
Yeah.
But so like with traveling, is that the kind of, because I haven't been traveling before, so like as you're moving around and you haven't got much objects, I guess you're gonna get used to a general low level of breaking homeostasis or whatever.
Right, and traveling actually can become your homeostasis, where you're always on the move. If you end up staying in one area too long, you might also get antsy and feel the need to go, or get the quote-unquote travel bug.
That's very true. I forgot people get like that. It's interesting because, like, within a resource-based economy, like as you're trying to do, like traveling would be free, and I think probably a lot more people would do it, because if we have access to things anywhere, there's no reason that I can like get a plane to Finland tomorrow and just work from there, and or do your own personal project or your own personal learning or whatever, not a job as such. Like that would be really cool, I think, to be constantly moving around, and like you can still do everything that you want to do from home or from your workstation, but you can just go anywhere and do it. So you would, I think.
Absolutely.
I think like home ownership would drastically be reducing the resource-based economy. Because me personally, I'd want to be in a band, and I and the band would probably just travel from one city to the next. Sleep on the train, wake up, go to a practice room, play, and then like sleep somewhere, and then be in the next city by the next day. That kind of thing. Just constantly travel whilst maintaining the activities I want to do. I mean, there's no real need for a home in that situation, or possessions in that sense.
Exactly, Tom. And the other thing is, when you travel, you have, as I mentioned, a lot of stimulation going on in your head. You're being exposed to a new environment. A lot of your senses are heightened, and you feel more alive when you travel, and it can be addicting. So you can't stay in one area too long, because once you become comfortable there, you actually become uncomfortable at the same time, and you feel like you got to go again. So
Wow, you're really selling traveling to me right now.
it's an awesome thing, though. I mean, it really is, and you guys should start doing this. When you talk to people about resource-based economy, or whatever, ask them, are they travelers? Find out about them, because I'm willing to bet that the people who are most receptive to the ideas that we speak of are travelers or have been travelers.
I suppose another big factor is kind of witnessing different cultures and things. Like, I went to Germany once as a student, and like just even the architecture, it was just subtly different, and kind of changes your perspective and breaks down quite a lot of barriers. And like places like Bulgaria as well, I used to go there every year, and their culture's a lot different. It's weird coming back to England, and even after 2 weeks of just being in Bulgaria, I find I had to like adjust back to the social norms of England. And I suppose that plays a big part in it as well, like putting things into perspective.
And what's going to be really cool, again, is like when you think about ideas and creativity and stuff, is it heightens your creativity. Ideas are just ideas that have had sex with other ideas. And when you're being exposed to all these different architecture, for example, or cultures and stuff all over the world, you start picking the best parts of each one and coming up with something completely new. So if you're a world traveler and you end up in this area that is just very underdeveloped, you will have all kinds of solutions to help out these people, whatever's going on here. And you'll just have so much more to offer the world. So this is, I mean, Jacques talks about it quite a bit about learning. You don't learn in a classroom. You learn through experience. And if we have very efficient transportation set up in the future, kids can be exposed to all different parts of the world. Not just kids, everybody. And we'll be able to maintain that mental state of being able to learn very quickly. It's just that, again, what happens is we get put in a state of homeostasis, and we're always exposed to the same limited environment, so we aren't learning new things nearly as fast as we were when we were younger. But it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, I think a quick point on that as well is a study I recently read. The figures were roughly learning is children can kind of recall what they learn to 70% effectiveness when they discussed the topic, to 80% when they experienced it, and to 90% when they taught someone else it. So that kind of falls in. There were other statistics like 20% when they read about it only, and things like that. So yeah, the studies pretty much back that hypothesis up.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting though, because I don't know about you, Tom, but from like our kind of UK team of the regulars that meet up on Mondays, I don't think anyone has been like a prolific traveller. We haven't really talked about travelling before. It's strange because like for me anyway, like I'm coming around to the idea now. But for basically most of my life, I haven't really been up for traveling. I'm gonna. I've always just kind of liked having my little. I like my little homeostasis shell. That's it. I just like having my comforts and knowing where everything is. But
Mm.
like, I am coming around now, and I think I definitely do want to start doing stuff.
Well, there was a point in my life where I was quite close to just packing up and traveling because I was completely sick of my current life and I just wanted adventure. Like I was so bored and so kind of understimulated, and like even now I long for adventure. I kind of want to throw myself at Europe and see where I find myself. That's the dream for me. So I've always like traveling's always seemed really well appealing to me. But the problem is I kind of feel like I could maybe be more useful to my kind of aims in life, which is to see a resource-based economy and instituted. If I didn't travel, if I spent, say, a year kind of creating my own project and getting the foundations of something where I can work towards that, rather than say traveling the world, which I'm sure would be an amazing experience. But for right now, for me, it's kind of find that balance. It's like, well, what do I do? Do I really bog down and try and create something, or maybe spend even more time educating myself and traveling the world? I mean, that's not to say that I'll stop educating myself the second I start being more of a practical activist, but you know what I mean.
I think that it's worth giving a shot. For example, just go off like on a weekend and go stop at some hostels. When we were discussing the idea of creating a hostel, I actually had never been to one before, and I was like, all right, because I always was at hotels. My family's actually a little wealthy, so I didn't even know what a hostel was. And I was like, all right, well, I need to check these things out. So I went and traveled down through Chicago and some other areas and saw I stayed at a different hostel every single night. And every day I talked with probably at least 8 people about a resource-based economy who'd never heard of it before. So I exposed more people in a week than I had in the previous years that I was learning about this kind of stuff.
Mm.
So it's interesting, and these people will take the ideas and spread them to other people. So we're talking about having global reach when you do this as a traveler. Well, if you just do this as in your locale, you're only affecting the people directly in that area.
Yeah, my current dream is to, within the next 5 to 10 years maximum, be both traveling and advocating a resource-based economy at like relevant events, universities and rallies and discussion groups. These kind of things. It would be that's kind of my goal right now, to be in that position.
I'm looking at traveling right now and thinking, well, I could actually do with more time to read, and I really like reading when I'm on a bus or I'm on a train or something. It's basically the best thing to do, and I read a lot when if I have a 2 hour flight, I can read a lot. Whereas, because I try and read every day, but I don't often get that much time, or maybe do half an hour here or there. So that would be good, and like if I can do things where like with the future, if I could go there and it's an experience where I really feel like I can learn something, um, then I've been looking at other things like there's aquaponics for Aborigines in Australia. There's like a volunteer thing that people can go there for like 6 months and help set up something. Like I'm like, that's cool. That's a completely different environment. Some people with different values. Aquaponics is like fun and exciting right now for me. So like I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. Like if I can do stuff like that, I don't want to do the standard traveling that some of my friends have done and just meet people who will just want to get drunk and go out every night. Like, that's not what I want to do with traveling.
Mm. Yeah, I think Che Guevara said that traveling was one of the most valuable experiences of his life, in that he learned a lot from it, and it gave him the motivation for social change. I remember that being kind of like a paraphrase quote.
Yeah, I think you guys have a lot of fun at the future because again, or just hostels. It doesn't even have to be here because they have these common areas, these common spaces. which a lot of people at first, if you don't experience it, you don't understand it. You're like, that doesn't sound very nice. I like my own space kind of thing. But when you're exposed to these common areas, you meet incredibly interesting people, and you just have so much to share with each other. And these are people who they're just so much more well-rounded than a lot of people who haven't gone anywhere. And it's not because, again, it's just because you learn so much on your travels through exposure. We can read about all these different countries and stuff, but that's just through the eyes of the author. But when we're the author, it's a totally different thing.
Hmm.
And I think that, like for example, like I mean, let's do a hypothetical. We'll say that the future's up and running and doing well, and Aiden comes down at the end of the year, and we're working on some new hydroponic system. So he gets involved and he's helping out. He's earning a stay by building these systems. And then we have these new guests and stuff. They come and they're also curious about hydroponics. But then he has the opportunity, of course, to teach them about this stuff. So he's now a learner, a builder, and a teacher all at once. And he'll have a lot to walk away with at the end of that experience, and then be able to take that somewhere else and expand it.
Kind of feel bad that I went into creative arts and music instead of aquaponics now.
Hey, I did a music composition degree, hand up. I did a master's in sound and music for interactive games. Have you ever heard of anything more useless?
Nah, like the thing is, again, I think we're all gonna be generalists in the future. We need to have these a very widespread education. I spent a few years of my life learning about that kind of stuff, but I spent many different segments of my life learning about all kinds of other things. And because of it, I feel that I'm a much better person than if I had specialized in any one thing. And
Yeah,
specialization is the assassin of creativity.
that's an interesting idea.
Definitely.
Hmm.
It's something that I've really felt in myself, I guess, as well. Like, just kind of looking through my years, I tend to go through like 2-3 year kind of gaps of where I'll go for something over here and like, because I didn't do music at GCSE. I just didn't, which is like 15-year-old for you, Stephen. I didn't do it around that era. Um, Basically, and then I got really into it, and then did that for about 3 years, and now I got really into programming for a couple of years, and now that, like, I'm trying to get into like other stuff now, and I don't see that ever stopping for me. I don't want it to stop. I really enjoy kind of the transition to learn something new, to get a new hobby, and really get into something different.
Yeah, for me, there are a few setbacks in that what I learn often, I don't find many people who I see in like real life that I don't discuss on the internet with I can relate to regarding the discussion, like human behavior. A lot of people, I'll talk at them and they'll get bored, or general semantics. That's even worse. People just switch off. So it's like it's a lot of the information I learn is like all in my head, and it's bubbling, and I just want to use it, and I just really enjoy thinking about it. But it gets a bit, I won't say stressful, but annoying that there aren't many practical implications of what I've learned beyond talking at people.
Well,
But
that's the thing. That's the next step that I'm on right now. Is I've got some information, I want to share it. So how do I share it? Because I've never been particularly good at getting points across. I've never been particularly good at like just talking to people and getting people in a state where they can be bothered to listen to me properly and stuff. So that's my next line of inquiry, and that's what I'm going down. And then we'll see from there.
yeah, same. Like,
Anyway, talking of like traveling, I know Stephen, like you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but we've been talking a bit this week about Ecuador. It sounds like another good place that I might want to travel, and maybe you'd want to explain why.
Yes, so speaking of the idea of homeostasis earlier, this is a country that over the past 30 years has spent 31 months in revolution. They are constantly overthrowing their governments and experiencing change. They've been the victims of banks, first world nations, and corporations. So they've been exploited in every way possible. So this country is looking at being the first nation state to become to enter the post-capitalistic era. They are moving back towards a common-based open knowledge society. They will not have patents, and they're trying to get rid of middlemen in all ways. They're moving towards sustainability, and their goal is to eradicate poverty. And they're doing this by creating access to things that people need to live, and really just taking advantage of the tools that we all have at our hands right now, like the internet, like 3D printing, like more alternative energies, and more efficient gardening systems. So,
So they're running
but
off a lot of open source technologies, isn't it?
yes.
I had a quick look there because they mentioned I forget what it's called, the open source village construction set, whatever it's called. There's 50 machines which essentially open source, so anyone can make them from stuff that's around, that's pretty easy to get, is what I've understand. And basically it provides you everything that you need to make a village.
Right. Yeah, that's a cool system because yeah, you can build the stuff at cost. But I think what's more interesting is the idea that look, they're kind of what China did. They aren't respecting patents, or they don't plan to. And if you reinforce the idea that ideas cannot be owned, they're owned by everybody, you can accelerate technological change. We'll use the U.S. as an example. Tesla has invented a ton of different wireless technologies, from communications to energy, and it has taken about 100 years for some of these technologies to actually become popular because they're continuously being repatented and rebranded for the sake of making some of the wealthiest people on the planet. And to just be like, look, we're not going to abide by your patents. We can have had hundreds of years of advancement in the U.S. happen in a single year. And when people are able to share ideas, you can quickly build upon them, as opposed to having to wait 20 years before somebody else is allowed to improve your idea. We have an incredibly slow and archaic system right now that is just harmful. And to realize that, I think, is huge for a country to be like, look, ideas are not owned by anybody, and we've been exploited enough.
Listen, they have they have like these kind of reverse patents, don't they? I can't remember exactly what they're called, but it essentially means that you can't patent it. It's guaranteed open source.
I'm not familiar with that.
I don't know. I thought that was mentioned in there. Maybe I was just misreading it, and it's just that they're just ignoring patents.
Something I read in the article, which kind of summarized it quite well, is there'd be like public 3D printers and the ability to print devices, but the cost for that device would only be in the printing materials. So with the whole idea of there being no patents and things like that, and that that's brilliant. That's definitely a bold step towards a resource-based economy, in my opinion. But one thing that I was thinking whilst reading the article is, how long will it be before Ecuador is demonized in the Western media, and they begin to allegedly build nuclear weapons or some bullshit like that, and the basically US invade to protect and to perpetuate their established system, and that worries me a bit. I think it's quite essential that this information about this society that they're trying to create becomes, it gets into the public eye, because it seems to me definitely a possibility that it'll be corrupted, the information.
It's kind of like reminiscent of, if you remember our second radio show, with Chile and Project Cybersign in the 70s, which, Stephen, if you're not aware of this, or anyone else is listening, basically Chile for a couple of years in like conjunction with an English professor, I've forgotten what his name is, tried to cybernate their production system. And yeah, basically, as Stephen's just said in the chat box, the CIA kind of screwed them up. And they sent in insurgent, people to rally revolutionists. They put economic kind of constraints on the country, and basically there's a massive shouting match of them, calling them communist and all this kind of stuff. Well, yes, they were socialist, I think, at the time, but the world just turned against them and they collapsed. And
What's
yeah,
very exciting with
Yep.
what they're doing right now is that they are reaching out to the entire world. They're reaching out to all open source communities. They are creating a completely transparent government so that it can be viewed by anybody all over the world. So it's going to be difficult to create false information about them because they're so transparent and because you and I can help them with their technologies and their advancement. We have like a vested interest in their success. So that's one of the things that the internet has done so well is that they quickly spread the truth, or it allows people to find the truth more easily. I mean, if you look at how many wars have we had since the internet, it's really dropped significantly because propagation of false information is harder because it's much easier to validate. You can hear your opponent's side now, unlike before where we had to rely on our media to tell us what they thought was happening. So we have access to both sides' news, and it is more difficult. Absolutely, there will be opponents to it, and there will be people trying to mess it up. I have no doubts there. But at the same time, it's open source, and there hasn't been anything that stopped open source yet, and it's just growing in all areas. And as more people become aware of it, I think the stronger it's going to get. And that's another push towards creating this transition we're speaking of is the open source movement.
Yeah.
I'm going to find a link for you guys. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, with like 3D printers, an interesting open source thing is RepRap, REP. If anyone is not aware of them, they are open source 3D printers where essentially you can print. Well, the idea is you can print many of the components to make a new 3D printer. There's been some that have even printed whole 3D printers completely, all parts. But most of the models that are out there, and they're not even that expensive. For someone, if anyone's interested in a bit of soldering maybe and a bit of kind of hobbyist, a 3D printer looks very, very interesting. If I had about £800, I think you can get a very good RepRap full kit. You can get it cheaper if you actually go and buy printed parts off eBay and stuff, and you can actually, if you get all the bits and put it yourself together, you can make it even cheaper. And it looks very interesting. I think I'm gonna get one fairly soon because they're cool. It's all open source. You can modify the designs. You can make your own. There's already been so many like spawn-offs of the RepRap kind of model.
And that's if you want to own a 3D printer. I personally don't intend on owning a 3D printer because there are so many available. If you were to go to the website makexyz.com, I think it is. If you own a 3D printer, you can list yours on there, and you can print off your projects for other people. So again, this is an idea of access. I want access to a 3D printer, but I don't have enough need for one for me to own it. There's a book called Abundance by Peter Diamandis. He's the creator of the X Prize, as well as Singularity University. In his book, he talks about the three major pushers for creating this transition that we're speaking of. One is the open source movement, and the other one is actually it's called the billions. Over the next 6 years, we're expected to triple the amount of people who have access to the internet to over 66% of the world's population will have internet access, which is just huge. So we're talking about like all corners of the world having access to the internet and having a voice on here. The spreading and sharing of ideas, it's growing exponentially. So when we have a group like Ecuador doing this kind of thing, and then we have these new third world countries coming online, and they have two options for how they're going to enter the world economy. They can enter it by going into debt through banks, or they can do what Ecuador is doing with the common base open knowledge society. And that just seems like the hands down best choice for a country that doesn't have money and can look at the history of every single country who's gone into debt with the banks and what's happened to them. They're just falling apart. So these countries will actually be able to have a clean slate and build upon all the technology and all the advances that mankind has ever built so far.
Certainly has made me feel more hopeful and positive.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've had that kind of thought of, you know, Ecuador is obviously doing it, but it is the emerging countries right now that really have the chance to do something quite drastic and quite different. I don't see like, the top eight, or the kind of big countries in the world like doing a really drastic change. I think they're going to try and keep on with patchwork because the system they have it's kind of working on a superficial sense, and it keeps people like falsely kind of where we are and placated. So we're not going. I don't think there's going to be a huge turnaround in the UK, say, in the next 10 years.
Right. Well, again, the current system, it's a game, and we have winners and losers. And the winners have, that the U.S. is a winner, and we've built our wealth upon the slavery of these other nations. So the ones who are losing are the ones who are going to stop playing the game first, and the ones who are winning will be the last ones to stop playing this game.
Mm.
It's true.
I
And if the
think
losers stop playing, then maybe the winners will lose what they've been winning. You know what I mean?
Well, they'll realize that at the end of the day, it was just Monopoly they were playing, that to put the money all away because it has no other value. So it's gonna be a rough day for them when they're like, but whatever.
I look forward to that day.
Yeah, it's.
Cannot
I
come
think
soon.
that they'll be happier too. Everyone's
Um,
going to benefit when we transition. There's so many benefits for wealthy people that unfortunately most of us don't discuss, and I
mm,
don't think we have time today for it. But the the wealthy will benefit quite a bit actually from switching to a resource-based economy.
Oh yeah, even like quite a lot. I think, yeah, it's definitely one for another day. But I'm gonna write that down. I think we should definitely bring that up again.
mm. I suppose it's discussed less because we're less likely to be kind of talking to or viewed by, the wealthy.
Well, statistically, yeah, they're they're like the 0.1%. So yeah.
Mm. But it's important to note that it's not a fuck the office, fuck government and CEOs and things. It's
Yeah,
they're going to benefit as well. It's a
definitely.
human thing.
And I think like as part of the transition, we have to kind of like embrace these people back in because they've been vilified a lot, and basically lines have been drawn, and we can't really get into an RBE if we still have these lines between like who's rich and who's not, because we're still blaming people for things that have done in the past. And yes, obviously people have done bad things, but getting angry and swearing at them is not going to improve the relationship between you two. You're only going to create more of a divide, and in this divide they have the power.
Yeah. And also, a lot of these things that, I mean, they actually have some mental problems. I mean, hoarding is a disorder. And people don't view hoarding that way because they view that as they're just very wealthy. It's like, no, they're hoarding.
Mm.
They
Those
don't intend on
materials,
using these resources.
That's
Just
really
hoarding.
cool, actually, because like you watch hoarding programs and it's like an old guy with tons of newspapers in his house, but like it's the same with just a bunch of numbers on a spreadsheet. It's exactly the same.
Yep.
Yeah. My old job, I used to do a lot of selling of online accounts, which was like for video games and stuff actually. And I was making about $10,000 a day doing this, but this was my life. And I didn't even get to play the games anymore. I was just buying and selling these accounts. And the reality hit me when all of my accounts and my PayPal account was basically deleted and zeroed out. Like I was wealthy one day, and then the next day, all gone. It was like it was just a game I was playing because I never had real money in my hand anyway. It was just a number that kept growing, and I just had more and more virtual stuff. None of it existed. So this was like the most realistic example of the system we're in. It was like, you know what? Whatever it would have been, it can just go away overnight. Hyperinflation can happen to us, and all the wealth that you may have ever had goes away. Or a country can change its policies and confiscate your territory. I mean, there are no certainties, and to have this idea that you own these numbers is ludicrous.
Absolutely.
I think that would be a good
Yeah,
statement to end on.
that is pretty much the end of our show. Thanks, Stephen, for coming along. It's been a very good chat.
Yeah,
Thanks,
cheers,
Tom
Steve.
and Aiden. Pleasure.
Yeah, we'll have you on again at some point.
I look forward to it.
You have
Great.
no choice.
Yeah.
And thanks for listening as well.
Yep. Cheers and bye.